Legends, welcome back to Room 9. I want to start off by sharing some really exciting news, actually. I've been accepted into the computer science program at the University of British Columbia as a third-year student. You may be wondering, how's that possible, Room 9? How are you getting in as a third-year student? Well, a little bit of background about me. I have both a master's and a bachelor's degree, neither of which I'm actually using in the job that I've been working in the last 4 years. And I've just been kind of trying to get myself into a financially stable situation where then I can pursue my passions. And it's taken 4 years, but it's finally happening. Not only am I starting game dev, as you know, but I'm also pursuing a second degree. For those of you who don't know what a second degree is, it's a program for old geezers like me who just want to make a career change after spending the best years of their life discovering the meaning of sunk cost. Anyway, I'm looking forward to it, and let's just get back to the real reason why we're here. Let's start with a quick recap. We're building a tactical RPG in Godot, and we're about 3 weeks in at this point. At the end of the last episode, we came full circle to where we were at day 1, unsurprisingly. We ended up with a somewhat functional game board with a hover indicator that highlights different cells within the grid when you mouse over them. So you'd expect that we probably got very little done in the past 2 weeks, because after all, I'm just a newly minted game dev, right? Wrong. Because if nothing else, I am someone who aims to subvert your expectations. Look at all these wonderful tickets that I've managed to clear in the past 2 weeks. Ta-da! I mean, don't get me wrong. It's still a long ways away from the vertical slice that I want to put up on Steam as a demo eventually for all of you to play. I haven't even touched the art and animation too, and that's definitely going to be my biggest challenge in this project. I might end up using external assets for the vertical slice, but I mean we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Even so, despite these limitations, I am proud of what this month has shaped up to be. Let's go through each feature and improvement I made and have some fun along the way. Number 1 is camera manipulation. The first thing I did once I opened up Godot was to implement a camera, because I figured that if you wanted to play the game, you kinda need to be able to look at different parts of the board, especially in a 3D environment, and especially if you need to try and figure out what positioning you want your units to take up. And there are 3 ways that I wanted to achieve this: free look, panning, and rotation. Free look mode is when you can use an anchor or pivot point somewhere in the environment, in our case it's the camera object, and be able to freely rotate it using the mouse, hence why it's called free look. In order to make this work, what I did was to take in the X and Y axis inputs from the mouse whenever the middle button is clicked, and apply the rotation to something within the whole camera object called the twist pivot node and pitch pivot node. The twist pivot will handle all the horizontal movements, and the pitch pivot will handle the vertical movements. At the end of both these pivots is the camera 3D node. The effect is that we can rotate where the entire camera object is looking without messing with the rotation of the end camera 3D node. And this is important because the position and the direction that that camera 3D node is looking has to be used in order to do a bunch of math everywhere. So if you mess with the rotation, then it messes with all the math, and then the world will explode. And so yeah, you don't want that to happen. Panning was a little bit easier. The camera pan service handles the movement, but it needs the input passed down to it first. And that's where the input capture service comes into play. Once the WASD key is pressed, the input capture service will overwrite a state resource, which then says we're pointing in this direction, and that resource is referenced in the camera service to trigger the panning subservice. The tricky part was I needed to figure out how to calculate the local direction relative to the camera, which I had arbitrarily set with an initial pitch pivot of -35 degrees and a twist pivot of 270 degrees. This involved math that to be honest, I don't really understand even now, so I just leaned on the math that was already there in the original framework, hoping that I would never have to fix it up later. And the same goes for rotation, because I saw quaternions and decided that was a topic for another day. Alright, enough jokes. Let's move on to something that I actually did understand. Number 2, UX. This was actually where I spent the bulk of my time in the past 2 weeks, so there are a lot of updates. What I'm trying to say is, buckle up folks. I started by enabling friendly unit selection and toggling UI visibility when a unit is selected. That way you're not seeing move, attack, and skill all the time, and you can just enjoy the beauty of this map. Then, when move or attack is selected from the UI, the tiles that the unit can move to or are within attack range of that unit are highlighted in their respective color, allowing the player to then select one of those tiles to execute the movement or the attack. This was actually something that was only possible due to the changes we made in the previous video to the grid system, allowing for each tile to be referenced separately and also to have its state updated by external signals. It was around this time that I also figured, hey, maybe we should have different colors for the player and enemy units. I thought, hey, this is a great change and it will just take a second. However, this actually took just way longer than I want to admit. In the original implementation, we were passing a custom starting stats scene to each unit within the level node, but this wasn't working for some reason, so I ended up just passing the stats resource instead to the inspector and housed both the stats and skill nodes within the default unit scene rather than this status scene. And then once I added a default color to the starting stats file for each unit, it was just a matter of applying it to the material to each capsule or character sprite to adopt that color. In retrospect, although it did take an embarrassing 2 days to resolve what should be a pretty easy bug, I am glad that I took the time to troubleshoot this design because it ended up helping me to build out the skills and tile effects systems, but which I will get to in a bit. Next up on the UX to-do list was allowing for diagonal targeting. I didn't think it made much sense for units to be adjacent to each other diagonally and not be able to hit each other. I was thinking about, folks with spears and swords and they're just like standing right there and they're not able to hit each other. I thought that would kind of give a weird vibe and it didn't really much make sense from a thematic standpoint. And I also thought that it might be a little bit too much to ask the players to expend 2 movement points to move diagonally, as opposed to move from side to side while only expending 1 movement point apiece. So to add this feature, I did something very genius and something that no one's ever thought before, and I consider myself to be a connoisseur of game design. I ended up adding 4 more raycasts to each tile to detect the corner tiles and consider them as being neighbors, and that was pretty much it. Speaking of game design, I was thinking hard about how I could force movement itself to be a key mechanic in the game. After all, we are building a 3D tactical RPG, which means that positioning has got to be a key element of the game, and there is no positioning without movement. One mechanic that I implemented right away was height. Being in a 3D environment, I thought it only made sense that if you wanted to jump to a higher level on the map, then you would actually need extra movement points in order to reach them. I'm also wondering if maybe I should implement a modifier when a unit is trying to attack or use a skill, either from above or below the target. Let me know in the comments down below if you think that sort of feature is worth adding. A second mechanic that's in place now is that each unit exerts an area of control for opposing units within a 1 tile radius of itself. This way, basic movements will actually be stopped if the path goes through one of these tiles within the area of control, requiring the player to strategize a way to maneuver around enemies to reach a destination, or to get behind them and avoid the potential negative effects of attacking a unit from the front. And I'm thinking about things like a block or a counterattack to try and force the player to try and get around these units and attack them from a different angle. Last but not least, I also ended up adding a few more other UX elements like a character portrait and the mana resource area, as well as adding an end turn functionality and updating the map to look a little bit more interesting. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the UX. Number 3, system design for skills and tile effects. I'm lumping skills and tile effects into one section because they both deal with data flow. And I know, at this point you're probably like, really man? More data? Yeah dude, that's just how a tactical game goes. It's just a hog smosh of data being passed from one object to another so that it can elicit a new behavior. Like take this for example, when we set up the array of skills for each unit, allowing for each unit to have a custom skill set, each skill actually references a library of skills that then points to a path to a resource. The skills resource then gets imported during runtime and it's added to the control UI so that you can actually see and use the skill. When you select the skill, it determines what type it is, whether it's one that targets a unit, targets a tile, or has no targeting at all. Each of these cases has a different user flow in how the skills are executed, and thus they need to be handled separately. Moreover, each skill can have a multitude of different effects. For example, I've created a skill called Ground Slam, and it not only damages units as its primary effect, but it also has a knockback effect, which pushes a unit one tile back. This is a skill that I was actually planning for the enemy to use so that players would then have to figure out how to maneuver around the enemy as it constantly pushes them away using Ground Slam. The tile effects system was implemented very similar in a way that in the levels node you have an injection of a resource that it then references for each particular level. Now within this resource though, it's a custom dictionary where each tile effect is paired with the tile on the grid. This is a nightmare to do manually using Godot, so what I did instead was I just popped open VS Code. I created a script to iterate through a for loop to add a default tile resource to the first 300 tiles and an obstructive tile resource to the next 100 tiles. These resources are then attached to the tile script when the tile service appends that script to each mesh instance, resulting in something that we can check when the board service is highlighting cells to indicate where a unit can move or attack. In all, I'm planning to add a lot more skills and tile effects to create more diversity in the game, and I also want to incorporate a resource mechanic for the skills so that you have to choose which skills you want to use and when to actually use them. And that's it, ladies and gentlemen. 2 weeks of dev work in just under 13 minutes. Thank you for watching the video. Please leave a like and hit that subscribe button if you've enjoyed it. I, for one, have really enjoyed working on the game these past couple weeks, and I think I'm going to stick with 2 to 3 week sprints to get more game dev time in before publishing one of these update videos. It's also my 6-year anniversary with the wifey next week, and we're going to be spending a few days in Seattle to see My Chemical Romance, so my apologies if it takes some time before the next video. It's been a pleasure, folks. Adios.